the name of our show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Large Glass. My name is Todd.
I'm Terri.
And this is our weekly show where we bring you a new artist to talk about. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to see all of you. How's it going?
It's going all right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good. Let's see. Oh, my gosh. We got a house full already. We got people in the audience. Let's see. Who's here? We've got Don Stormo over on Facebook. We got Mom is here. Dave's here. Ben Hagenbush is here.
Hello,
Pumpkin Audrey.
hello.
John and Jess Park. Good to see you. Joseph Barbacci is here. TNT. That is right. Carolyn Thau is here. Hi, Carolyn. 63. Boo Jazz.
All right.
We got a house full.
Yeah, the house is coming in.
It's good to see all of you. Thank you for coming.
Episode 81.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. We're closing in on 100.
We are.
We figured that 100 is going to fall right around the late July time frame, which we're kind of excited for. There's Jamie Foster. Jamie, check your email. I sent you something today. We're closing in on 100, which I'm thrilled about.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm going to be honest, we don't have a plan for that yet.
We don't. In fact, we initially scheduled a summer vacation, which we're going to kind of rearrange so that we're able to do the 100th episode. So nobody else go on vacation either because you're all supposed to be there.
David Backus is here.
Hey,
he says,
Dave.
I'm here. Hi, David. Good to see you. Carolyn wants to know if we're having a party. I think a party's in order for 100.
Yeah.
All right, Carolyn, we're having a
good.
party.
All
We're
right.
having a party. Let's see. Who won the pin, the contest?
The contest was really good this week. We had a lot of participation, lots of guesses. It was Waterhouse. That was the detail that I posted. And the winner was Glenn Lavertu.
And he also picked up on the fact that the flowers in the young woman's basket were the colors of Ukraine's flag, which is just, and I would like to say that we put that up there with that intention.
Yes, I would too.
But it was just a moment.
Yeah,
it was a lucky moment.
A lucky moment. So,
Carolyn, I'd like to have the party in Maine, but I don't know if that's going to happen. Do the 100th show live. Audrey, we do all the shows live. What are you talking about? Okay, so Glenn won the pin.
Glenn won the pin.
And I think we should give away a pin tonight.
I think
you guys want to have
right.
Should we have a giveaway?
We haven't done one in a while.
Should we do a pin giveaway tonight?
Yeah, let's do it.
As if that's, I planned on doing this already anyway.
Yes, and it's the cool A is for absinthe pin.
We're going to do the A is for absinthe pin. Can I find that? Can I pop that pin up on the screen? There it is. So the A is for absinthe pin is going to be given away tonight. So for you who are out there who have our first pin and are dying to get your hands on this one, let's start a contest. Shall we? All right, I'm going to pop that off and I will get that contest going. And then we're going to open our drinks. All right, so for those of you who have never participated in our contest before, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, unfortunately the contest is not going to work for you, so you got to come over to Twitch. It's twitch.tv/Todd Lambrix. And once you jump in there, you can make a quick free account. It's free. Follow us. And then in the chat, you're simply going to type !raffle, space, and a number 1 through whatever you want. The more of your points that you put in there, the more of a chance you have to win the pin. Everybody knows how to do this. Ben is like, I got to have that one. Val Savilli's here.
Hey, Val.
So make sure to join the contest and get yourself a pin. All right, should we go to Cocktail Cam?
We're going to go to Cocktail Cam.
All right, so tonight we consulted with George Boorujy, tonight's artist, about what we should drink. And we hemmed and hawed a little bit about it, but George was pretty quick to kind of move towards the gin and tonic. And given the warm weather today and the fact that spring is like right in our lap, gin and tonic's a perfect drink, right? So I'm very excited about having a gin and tonic. You won't drink a gin and tonic.
I'm not much of a mixed drink person, but I'll go with wine, some white wine.
So
Todd's
Casillero del Diablo, Sauvignon Blanc for you.
Yeah.
63
Thank
says
you.
G&Ts are great. Yes, 63, I agree.
are.
And 63, I think you should come over here on a nice afternoon
you.
so we can have G&Ts on the deck. I think that would be very nice. For me, let's see. Let's switch cam. We'll kind of move over here. I've got a pretty simple setup. Now, typically, you should drink a gin and tonic in a Collins glass. That's the sophisticated way of doing it. It would be the appropriate way for me to do it. I prefer the pint mug.
Can I just add that the lime almost looks green right now? It probably won't in a few moments, but
See what a lime looks like on a green screen?
Yeah.
It's cool. It kind of disappears. But a little Prairie organic gin. That's more than enough. Don't worry, I'm not drinking this whole thing tonight because I have to function tomorrow. However, perfecto.
ooh,
A little lime, and we can get into toasting our 81st episode.
81.
81. Everybody, let us know what you're drinking in the chat. It's good to have you here. Here is to episode 81. We're excited for tonight's artist. Cheers. Did I
Cheers.
just spill on you?
You did not.
Whoa. Joseph Barbaccia is drinking Red Breast. Excellent. Ben likes the cutting board. Yeah. 63 says, great. We could stumble off the deck and do some fly fishing too. Yes. David Backus is drinking Gavi, hazy little thing IPA for
Ooh, yum.
63. Nice
nice.
one. Yeah, so it turns out that even after talking with George about having a gin and tonic, he is now having an IPA. So, and he's waiting in our green room, as we call it, with that IPA right now. So, anyway, what other things do we have to talk about besides support, which I'm going to get to in a second?
That was all the reminders for the beginning of the show. I know I have to remind you of something towards the end of the show.
I need a lot of reminders tonight.
Lots of reminders.
So, by the way, if you want in on that pin giveaway, make sure to type into the chat, ! raffle, all one word, space, 1 through, I think I said it at 100. And that's going to get you into the raffle for tonight, which is going to end right around 9 o'clock. So make sure to get in there. When I drink gin, it's Hendrix. I agree. I love Hendrix. I picked up the Prairie just because I wanted to try that one. I had had it once before. Also, Joseph, if you like, try the Botanist. The Botanist is a fantastic gin. Although Hendrix, of course, is my go-to. It's my standard. Carolyn Thou says she won't play.
Oh. That's okay. You can play.
You can play if you want to.
Carolyn tends to win, so she's trying to be a generous spirit right now.
Right. She does tend to win.
Yep.
Okay, so let me just talk a little bit about support and how you can help us out here. So supporting us is simple. There's a number of ways you can support us. First and foremost, send friends. Alert your friends to come and watch the show. We would love that if that happened. So that's the first thing. Get them to follow us. If you're here right now and you've never watched the show before, give us a follow. Subscribe on YouTube. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitch if you want to. That would be enormous. We would love that. Number 2, you can go right over to our website, which is thelargeglass.org, and you can click on the support button. And there's all kinds of ways in which you can support the show. By following us, there's all kinds of perks that come with that. And frankly, it would really help us out. So Joseph Barbaccia is like, yes, the Botanist, that's the one. Yeah, definitely give that a go. All right, so Pumpkin Audrey is in on the contest. Good, we got somebody in there. Anyway, that's my plug for support.
That's great.
That's my plug for hopefully getting us some help. Should we start to consider introducing our artist?
We certainly can.
Okay.
Yes. So we actually talked about this artist back on episode 55, which seems like a really long time ago. It was last September. And Todd and I once took a fabulous live drawing class, and the models were outstanding. They were birds of prey. So tonight we have George Boorujy joining us. He was born in New Jersey. He currently lives in Brooklyn,
New Jersey, baby.
New Jersey. 2002 MFA from the School of Visual Arts in New York, and he also has a BFA from the University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida. That was 1996. He's had multiple solo exhibitions as well as been featured in group exhibitions as well. Also featured in select public collections. These include the La Brea Tar Pits and Museum in Los Angeles, the New York Historical Society in New York, National Museum of Wildlife Art of the United States in Jackson Hole, and also the William Louis Dreyfus Foundation in New York. He's also featured in a number of publications, including The New Yorker, the Brooklyn Rail, New York Times, Harper's, many others. We love him. We are so proud that George Boorujy is joining us tonight.
Hi, George. How's it going?
Hi, how you doing?
Doing great. Nice to see you, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
To see you.
So we're super excited to have you here. We know that you just kind of arrived at a friend's house and you kind of forgot your gin along the way. So so here's to you. Cheers.
But you did bring another beverage,
That's
so
right.
That's good.
So good to see you.
There's always a couple beers rolling around in the car somewhere. So I managed.
Road
great.
soda. We do not condone drinking and driving. Just
No. I wasn't. They were just in the car.
no. I'm just saying that for the camera. Making sure to make that point for the the other powers that be.
Yeah.
So let's see.
Ooh.
Where do we begin tonight?
Well, we can begin where we normally begin.
I would love that.
And we did feature you once on the show, but usually how we start off lately, we know what you do. We're very familiar with it, but some of our audience members are not. So what we've been having artists do is just describe your work in a general sense, what you do and how you work.
Yeah, agreed.
Sure. I'm mostly a painter. I'd say that's pretty much all the finished work I make is painting. And I've always been doing stuff about nature. It's more like, man and nature, how we relate to the environment, how we relate to the natural world. And that has taken the form of animal representation a lot. In fact, almost primarily until kind of recently. But for the last, I'd say, almost 20 years, it's been pretty animal heavy, very animal heavy, and that has also kind of dovetailed into some kind of like scientific illustration work too. So it's not just it's mostly operating kind of like the fine art commercial world, but then sometimes it ends up veering into some almost like educational scientific illustration stuff. Some stuff is like straight up scientific illustration. Other stuff is a little bit more like off that a bit. Like when you go to the Bronx Zoo or something, you'll maybe see some of my illustrations, or La Brea Tar Pits in LA, which you guys mentioned. I illustrated the Birdwatch column for the Guardian UK for over a decade, actually. So, that was sort of, that had sort of a pretty big impact on me, all the birds. And then, stuff for Audubon and, a few other things, New York City Parks Department. So that's sort of been on that end of it. And then the other side has been more in the commercial realm, like the gallery realm, like the fine art realm.
Gotcha. And I'm going to kind of just click through a couple of the images that tend to be more familiar in associating with your work. Like when we encounter you on the internet, these seem to be some of the images we see first. And then we'll kind of branch off into some of the more contextual work, not that this isn't, or the work that is happening now, which is an interesting departure, and I'm looking forward to talking about. But we recently were talking also about Audubon.
Yes.
And some of the connections that you had there. And you had installed some really large pieces, like, just out in the open. How was that? What was that connection like, and how did that work out?
That project was the Audubon mural project, and that was put together by Avi Gittler, who ran a gallery that was uptown in Manhattan, basically where Audubon lived in Manhattan. And he sort of started this project of getting all of the climate threatened birds in North America represented in mural form in that neighborhood. And he knew about my work. I found out about the project. We connected, and then I did a few murals, which was great and really, really great. It was fun to work at such a big scale. Some of my work is pretty big anyway, but it was nice to go like even larger and a little looser, even though they still look pretty tight. They were like a little bit looser because I was using house paints and, and then just also having them out of the context of a commercial gallery and having them up in just the neighborhood,
right,
for people to look at.
Right. And so when you say they're pretty big, like these images of birds, like I wasn't able to find the one I wanted to. There was a slide that I had seen a long time ago of you in the studio in front of a couple of these images. If I'm not mistaken, this was one of them. But can you tell the audience how big these are? Because these are big.
Some of them. This one's not gigantic. This one's probably about like
38 by 50.
Maybe. What is it?
38 inches by 50 inches.
Damn,
Thank you.
You're on it.
I'm on it.
So that one's a little bit. That one's not like gigantic. Some of them have been pretty big, about like 9 or 10 or like 11 feet wide.
Yeah,
so
that's
so gigantic.
And so let's talk about that. Like when you're thinking about scale, like the bison before, and definitely some of the ones we're going to see coming up, like, the choice to make it that large, I think has, some really interesting implications. But let's talk about that a little bit.
The scale is really, that's something I think about a lot. Like when I'm figuring out a piece, I don't have anything up on the wall, and I just kind of sketch loosely on the wall itself, just to feel like how big this thing should be before I then cut a piece of paper, cut a canvas big enough for it. I just like to sort of feel how this thing should feel. And it's really related to how you as the viewer are going to relate to it with your body. Like that feeling when you're in the presence of a piece, how that relates to you physically. And a lot of the pieces end up being kind of my own wingspan or something, like they relate somehow to my own body when I'm doing them. And the scale is pretty intuitive. It just kind of comes. And then, but there is also there's a reason why they're big for a lot of these. It's because it ties into the whole concept. A lot of times I'm doing something like this. This is a meadowlark, eastern meadowlark. And it's a bird that, you can see. You can even see it within New York City if you're lucky. You don't see them a lot in New York City, but they're here. And it's these things are small and you have to pay attention, and so I like the idea of blowing them up really large so that you kind of have to reckon with them. And they can seem confrontational, but it's really just a reckoning, because normally you don't have to confront something that can fit in the palm of your hand. But when it's the size of you or bigger, you have to actually look at it in a different way and relate to it in a different way.
Yeah, it's funny. We often talk about the confrontational gaze, like in a portrait or in any kind of situation where, the viewer is met with, looking back at or sort of confronted by the subject. And in this case, it's such a different and odd connection that's made between something small and delicate that now all of a sudden might be looking at me like I'm prey.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, because they aren't delicate. And that's the thing that I think that's sort of the point too, is that they're always presented like what they really look like. That's what that thing's face looks like.
Right.
Right. That's really what it's like. It's, anatomically very correct, but it's this idea of putting it on equal footing. So then that sometimes can make you feel unequal as a human, but it's just, you're putting it on equal footing. And then that becomes it's that, we share this planet. We're not the only ones. And it's, it's a little bit of that, like, tipping of the hierarchy.
Right.
And then also having a gaze, like that view is exchanged. It's not a voyeuristic. You're not observing something beautiful. You are having a conversation with it visually. It's looking at you, you're looking at it.
Right. Right. And given the context of these locations, like the one that we see on the screen now, it's kind of a downward look, like we're below this.
I mean, that's hung high. So then that's why it definitely seems like that. Yep.
Yeah. But there is a certain power in that that you can certainly
for sure.
feel. So, okay. So, let's see. Where did we want to go from here? I'm glad you found this, by the way. By the way, this image was not in the slideshow. Terri just threw that in there on the fly. She is the master.
Good job, Terri.
She's the master. She's the master. Let's see. There's a couple of questions in the chat. By the way, we didn't mention this before, but for those of you who are in the chat, as you ask questions, we will try our best to relay them to George and, help to shift the context of the show or the direction of our conversation. So feel free to hammer away at that chat and we will get to it as quickly as we can. One of our viewers asked, 63 asked, wondering if he feels any affinity with Walton Ford's work. I'm not familiar with this work.
Walton Ford does really, really beautiful, it's kind of also really large scale images on paper of animals, of wildlife, and his usually have a narrative related to them about like a particular story in history. They sort of look like they're from the 18th or 19th century. Like they kind of play with that of looking like they're from another time, basically. So they have a real kind of connection to that idea of Audubon and recording nature and all of that, so there's an idea there that's, when you look at it as far as materials and subject matter, seems, falls into a similar basket.
Yeah.
I think there's sort of a different thing to it, like a different, his is much more involved with a different, like a very specific narrative and a little bit more going on there. And I usually try to leave mine a little bit more open, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he did comment, as you were saying, that he said agreed. Let's see, there's Don Stormo on Facebook says, each animal presented here gives each subject such vibrant life. Well done. And John Park is saying, in the meadowlark, I really loved the eyes. The eyes were slightly different sizes with differences in the lids. Really makes them resonate as a human portrait would. It's a great comment, actually.
Yeah, I always have a lot of the stuff in there. There's a lot of imperfections in these pieces, and like this passenger pigeon, which is a famously extinct North American bird,
right?
Has bird shit in the feathers, and has there's little things in it. I think I even painted. I haven't seen this original in a really, really long time, but I think I have mites in there, and there's other stuff that's drawn in there, very, very tiny, and there's stuff like that shows up sometimes in there too. Right.
Because I think there's something to sort of really recognize in those imperfections, in it being, a part of the essence of that creature. Joseph Barbaccia says, does George's relation to the animals he paints change after the work? And if so, how?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Probably, yeah, because I spend so much time with them, and you do build a relationship with your subject. I'll study them a lot. I had this one piece up on my wall for a really, really, really long time of a Florida panther nursing like 3 cubs in a swamp. And it was probably one of the most like my favorite face I ever painted. And I just looked at her for so long and lived with her in the studio for so long that did become kind of like a relationship of sorts.
Right.
Like I really felt like there was some sort of bizarre connection there. So yes, I guess it does change.
I would imagine, that would have to be the case.
Yeah.
Let's see. There's some other comments coming in. Yeah, Don Stormo said agreed when it came to the comment before about, I think in the meadowlark. Ben Hagenbush is saying, I love how you captured the highlights and shadows in this one. Ben Hagenbush is a real stickler for detail. Great artist himself, so I know that he's like really getting into this and focusing on this.
I think the medium choice on some of these is pretty interesting too, because you talk about like imperfections and mistakes, and you're using, like in the previous one, it's ink on paper, and you don't really have room for imperfections. Like once it's done, or there's something that you might consider a mistake or an error, you can't go back and really fix that easily.
So yeah, pretty much everything we've seen except for that mural has been brush and ink on paper, and all the white is just the white of the paper. And so it really is these very planned out images, and I've always been really interested in negative space, and the negative space of paper speaks differently than the negative space in a canvas, because there's a different materiality there that you're dealing with. And in paper really can read, in my mind at least, as a true negative, and as opposed to the decision of like, what color are you grounding that canvas in, and and then raw canvas is a different decision. Like there's so much going on there, And then also the fact that you can only move forward with an ink drawing. You can't go backward at all. Like, so there's these ideas of decision and restraint. Like, what am I putting in? What am I not putting in? And every mark is recorded.
Yeah. I mean,
it's a bit of like a high wire act, which at times, like, now I'm working mostly with oil on canvas. And part of it was because I got like a little tired of the high wire act and not being able to fix stuff. And, you make a mistake, man, you're fucked. That's it.
I was going to say that. And, I love that kind of exactitude. Of course, I'm also a lover of abstraction and a kind of looseness, of course. But like this one that's on the screen right now, it just blows my mind sometimes when we look at it, because you managed to find in that precision a depth of field. And there's this physical diffusion to the tail feathers on this bird, or is it the wing feathers or the tail feathers that are sticking?
No, it actually comes out of the side of the neck.
But it's behind. But it is behind.
It's a little bit behind, and then they come up.
Right. So you've created a depth of field because this is not my eyes. There's a crispness to that face that is not present in those feathers, which just, I don't know, that just really adds to this in some kind of way. Glenn Lavertu is asking a question, which I'm going to put an image up on the screen that I think is going to help answer that question. But he says the animal's positions are not in a more recognizable profile, which renders them somewhat abstract. What goes into the decision to choose a particular pose, or is it simply just confrontational? Which I think it's not simply confrontational, but what goes into the decision on a pose?
A lot of these birds are sort of things you've seen before. Like, this is a blue jay. You've seen a blue jay.
Right. And
so in order to kind of slow down the viewer, you could look at a gigantic photograph of a blue jay and appreciate it and be like, wow, this is amazing. This piece is about, I don't remember how long this is. It's about like maybe 9.5 or 10 feet wide.
55 inches by 108 inches.
Okay. Yeah. So pretty large.
Yeah.
And so when you have something that's, 9 feet wide and you're looking at it and it's something that is normally much smaller, you do look at it differently. And then also, especially if you present it in a position that's going to like give you pause for a second. A lot of what I'm doing is trying to have people connect to the natural world, connect to these animals again. And you have to slow people down for that. We also process photographs so quickly. We look at, a million photographs a day. And so we process it really quickly. So then if you see something that's not a photograph, it's been handmade, I think the viewer just does slow down then. And then when they slow down, they start looking at more details. They pay attention more. They start processing more of it. They start internalizing it. And then they're like, oh, that's right. A blue jay, like those blues aren't all the same blue. And there's like, oh, that's weird. I never noticed that the secondary coverts went on this part and the primaries were here. And, just sort of, really digging into it and looking. This one I know has lice in it. Like, I know I painted lice in this one somewhere. I don't remember where they are. But especially when you see it in a position, you see a familiar animal in an unfamiliar position, it's going to slow you down.
Right.
And then you're going to look at it a little bit closer, hopefully, or a little bit with a different speed in your processing, which hopefully will let you internalize it a little bit more.
That's a really interesting point in terms of how the brain and your notions of perception shift when your expectations are thrown off. It's things slow down in order to take that in. So, for example, when we look at something like this, and you're talking about mites and lice and
mosquitoes on this one.
Yeah, so you can get in. We've got a detail of that when we get in closer, and it is this kind of drawing in, right? Like when we're confronted with this, or I shouldn't say confronted because we're using that word too much, but when we're presented with this piece and we look, we're now all of a sudden compelled to get even closer, to see what's going on in that space, which makes the relationship, which was already, I don't want to say challenged, but the relationship was already amplified. Now it's amplified even more. Mm-hmm. Right, which I kind of find to be fascinating. Were you going to say something or no?
No, it was just this continual evolution of what's being preyed upon, because there's often some kind of organism on top of this other organism that's already prey for something else, and here we are trying to dive into it and further examine it. So there's this constant feedback loop of what's happening in terms of subject material. And it's unforgiving too, because again, it's ink on paper, and it's like, just these waves of.
And we're part of that feedback loop as well.
Yeah.
Like we're kind of in that
Yeah.
that cycle, given the size or given the relationship we have as the viewer. Let's see. Did George study formal animal anatomy for his work? That's from Joseph Barbaccia asking.
No, actually. And then I ended up having to do that basically on my own. And that happened really organically because I was drawing so many animals, and I just happened to have, I would look at these things. I'd look at them really closely. And then that started leading me down the road of like, what's that bump? Like, what does that relate to? And then starting to look, on my own, getting books and just really investigating it further and really figuring it out. But I didn't have any. I mean, we actually talked this when we had talked briefly when I did my undergrad. I'd gone into undergrad in biology and then switched into art. But the program that I was in was really very abstract expressionism. Like it was very, very dominated by non-representational work. And I learned a lot, and it was great. But I was making images, and pretty much one of the only people making images. And so as far as figuring out how to do stuff like that, in college, I never did any formal investigation, even on my own. That happened afterwards when I started digging in deeper.
Huh. We're going to start to poke into some images that have a much more sort of suggestive context now.
Mm-hmm.
But as we start to dig into those, rather than jumping right into the images, I wanted to relate to you on a teacher level, because one of the things that I've always kind of been really envious of since I found out that you do it is you bring actual live raptors into the classroom.
Yes.
I mean, tell us about that, because that is fascinating.
Yeah, I had wanted to do. I've been teaching at SVA for I don't know how many years now. Actually, right now I'm on sabbatical for one semester.
Congratulations.
And then when I start next fall, it'll be the 12th year that I've been teaching there. So I've been teaching there for a long time. And I teach painting and drawing, but what I really started teaching there was anatomy, human anatomy. And so I was doing all of that. And then just kind of over the years, like having different students, I can't remember how many years ago I launched the animal class, but I had a lot of students who then would come in with questions about animals, and we'd figure it out, and I'd show them how to do them. And I was like, screw this, I'll just make a class about animals, And then, so I designed a class about animal anatomy specifically. And one of the things I wanted to do there was have live animals come into the classroom so that they could draw those as models. We would go to the zoo, we would do other stuff like that, but having them like that close and really with you is a different type of relation, and also really focuses the student. Like you can hear a pin drop when those classes are happening because the students are so concentrated, just trying to capture, because these things are constantly moving. You're really relating to it. You're, 3 feet away from, a harrier, like a Harris hawk or a great horned owl or something like that. And we bring in like possums. We've had a skunk in there. We've had fennec foxes. What else have we had? Rabbits and different reptiles and snakes. And, we've had like a lot of stuff in there.
That's fantastic.
But definitely a lot of birds.
And Glenn Lavertu just said in the chat, he's like, oh, that's cool. I'm bringing in an owl for my life drawing class next week. Any tips? And he said he's not the handler, obviously, but apparently he's bringing an owl in. So any tips for him on that?
Yes, actually. I'd say the biggest tip for the people drawing is the thing's going to move a lot. Don't keep trying to erase it and follow the animal. Anytime these animals are in like a setting, like in a classroom, they're going to keep taking the same poses again and again. They're going to look this way. They're going to scratch that way. They're going to turn around. They're going to ruffle their feathers. So if you're drawing on like a large sheet or something, start like 4 drawings each time. And then you're going to almost be working in the round, because it's going to be facing left and you can work on that one. Then it's going to turn around and be looking down, then start working on the one that you started that way. Then it's going to be looking right. You just kind of want to be as fluid as the animal is, and keep your drawing surface open, and don't get bogged down in trying to correct everything. Just have multiple drawings going on at the same time, because they're used to sitting on a perch. They're used to hanging out. It might fall asleep if you're lucky. If not, just start multiple ones.
That's great advice. I love that. Actually, I wouldn't have thought of that.
No.
You know, I noticed that when we were drawing the Raptors at Storm King, that they did move a lot.
They did. And I remember you saying to us, just keep it loose. And I do recall you saying something about moving around, but not so specifically like that. So yeah, that's great.
Right.
Those birds were ones I hadn't worked with before. The birds that I bring into school, I know a lot of those birds at this point. So I kind of can predict, I know where to put them in the classroom, and I can kind of predict how they'll do best. And
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Huh. He says, by the way, Glenn says, excellent, thanks. Joseph Barbaccia asks, this is a sort of moving off of the bird question. He says, what kind of difficulties did you face when moving from inks to oils, and what did you enjoy about the transition?
I enjoy being able to fix shit.
We all enjoy that.
Right?
The best. I kind of had to. I had worked in oils a lot prior, but I hadn't done it in, no joke, probably like 15 years when I went back to it, and so I did kind of have to relearn it. So that was a challenge.
Yeah.
And I'm still sort of in the process of that. I feel like every painting I make, I'm doing something a little bit different each time, and so I'm kind of relearning the paint in a way that, it's funny because I'll look at older paintings and be like, oh, that's how I used to paint. That's interesting. It's different now. So relearning the medium has definitely been a challenge, but like a good challenge. It's good, but no joke, I feel like every painting I've approached a little bit differently.
And I think as I push into some of that newer work that you sent along, I think that difference will be evident, not in any kind of way that says you're still learning a medium,
No.
but in a way that says
in multiple ways, I think.
Agreed. And
Yeah.
but one of the big ways is the handling of that medium and how. I should just put one up.
Yeah.
Can I put one up, George? Can I throw
Yeah,
throw up a newer piece? Let's see. So if we looked at something like so we're going from something like that's on the screen now, which is ink, to something like this, which is oils, right? So to me, there's a lot of really interesting elements in here, one of which I think has to do with the fact that you don't have to rely now on the white of the paper to function as your illuminating point, right? So, but can you talk about the shift now and what we're kind of looking at in terms of some of your new directions? Because I find these new ones to be really fascinating.
Yeah, I think part of also, I feel like the first piece that I did with oils, I knew I wanted to have like a big, I knew I didn't want a white background, basically. I knew I was going to be doing something that had like a fade from a really dark gray to kind of like a pale kind of grayish white. And so I was like, oh shit, there's only one way to do that. Like, I'm gonna have to do that with oil paint. Like, that's really the only way to do it.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, I'll do that one in oils. And then it sort of moved into something where I had a different level of control. It's just a different idea. And there's also a different solidity that I like, and a different kind of like juiciness. And then also I love the works on paper, but they're framed. And so there's a piece of glass between the viewer and the image. And I don't love that. I like for people to be able to get right up to it and really read those marks and just get right up to the surface. And I don't love the idea of the plastic in front of it.
Sure.
And then just conceptually, I've moved on to these different pieces, which are, to try to make this as brief as possible. I've been dealing with so many things with climate change and the environment for so long with my work. Like, we looked at some pieces that had some stuff to do with it. Like the one prior to this was about the pluming industry and whatever. And so I've done especially a lot of stuff about Florida, my most hated and most loved state. And
I'm going to throw a reference to that up as you say that right now. We're moving back to inks, but keep talking.
Oh, sure. And so, a piece like this is, actually this is sort of a good one you threw up. We've got a Florida panther and we've got flamingos. And so we have a super, super endangered cat that we've spent a shit ton of money and a lot of effort to try to preserve for who knows, like, it's still isolated in the southern part of the state. We haven't established proper corridors for it to breed better and expand and not get continually genetically bottlenecked. We've done a lot for it. Flamingos are so associated with the state of Florida. Mm-hmm. And, we just always think about it. But like, that's kind of bullshit. Like, they weren't really any there, except for there were flamingos there a long time ago. Uh-huh. And then they weren't there for a long time, but then now they've actually started coming back a little bit naturally into Florida Bay. They've been spotted a few times. And so they're kind of reestablishing some territory that they hadn't really been using for a super, super long time. And I kind of love this idea of the meeting of, these two, something that we're trying to bring back and trying to keep, and then something else that we associate with. And then, mountain lions, which a Florida panther is a subspecies of, will occasionally go on a complete killing spree if they get into an area where they can, and right. They'll kill way more than they need. And so it's this look on this cat of, in a way, what has it done? And it's this idea also of like Florida destroying itself, and it's never enough, and it's the most wild state and the one that's the most compromised and the most screwed and is not going to be there for much longer. Right. And just right. All of it was in there. And so I'd been working for so long with these ideas of either endangered species or extinct species, or trying to draw so much attention to these animals and have you relate to them. And I don't know if it was like me processing climate grief or exactly what I was doing through those images. I think that's part of it. But at this point, the imagery I've been working on now is thinking ahead in some way of where we will be, and kind of the rituals that we'll perform as we move forward into whatever new world we're entering into, because we are legit entering into a new world right now. Mm-hmm. And 100 years from now, things are going to look very, 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 very different. Yeah. Things may look very, very different 30 years from now. Mm. And in that tumult, what will happen? What will be birthed? How will we look towards whatever nature is there again? And what kind of rituals will come up against that? Because we are part of the world. We are the natural world too. And you ultimately have to get back to that elemental part of it. And so it's, how are we using literally the earth to make new ways to see the earth and to move through like our new world? And that's basically what I've been dealing with. Like that zebra one that you showed before is, a whole bunch of people that look like they're in Exodus. And that's the title of this is The Myth of Our Exodus. And it's, if you had to leave one land and go to another land, and what kind of ritual would you maybe perform beforehand? Or once you got to the new place, how would you reenact and process how you left? And in the most elemental way, like the clay of the earth, how would you formulate and try to process what you just went through, like with this refugee idea? And so I did a few pieces that were kind of about climate refugees, and this was one of them.
Gotcha. I love that reference to the elemental aspect of this, and how, I'm not going to say that the zebra in this painting has taken a back seat, but he's no longer front and center, and he's kind of now started to become, I'm going to say, somewhat secondary. And then we move on to something like this, and we start really thinking about that elemental aspect of it, and it becomes a little bit more surreal. It becomes a little bit more sort of rooted in, the shift that the earth that you're talking about is kind of going through. By the way, Nikki Darty over on YouTube just said, my boy is wicked smart. So I'm assuming that Nikki's probably from, Massachusetts or Rhode Island somewhere. But
yes, she is.
My boy is wicked smart. Be careful, or I'm going to just totally launch into my whole New England, banter. Yes, so.
Well, Nikki Dottie is wicked smart too.
Wicked smart. I'll meet you down at the Bubbler. One Good King is here.
Hey.
He says there's almost an AI-generated feel to the abstract elements in the oils, the surreality of the images that are both familiar and completely alien. Yeah, that's kind of...
that's nice to hear.
Yeah,
because it's actually funny, because these paintings are all the most directly I've ever worked from something I've made before. So I make these little sculptures and then I paint from them, and so they're super, super direct to like a real actual thing. But I did want them to seem very much like a set, like everything is lit very specifically, and kind of playing around with these ideas of like a set piece.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I really am interested in the fact that this comes from, almost a still life you're setting up with something you've already made.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. So I'll make the sculpture. And then with the animal pieces too, I was making maquettes for those because those positions were so unusual. So I would have to figure out how to actually draw these. So I would sculpt them first. And that's what's happening with these. And, the idea of these two are what kind of a ritual would you, this is ritual for finding your way in the dark. And, you picture people like, having to cross a board or do something, and it's really tricky and really dangerous. And you'd probably, I don't know, if you're religious, maybe you'd say a prayer before doing it, or you'd maybe do some sort of ritual, or even if that ritual is like, kind of just having the last swig of whatever you've got and kind of taking a moment. And so these almost like these little hastily made gestural things, like with a little offering of like, as the crow flies with that feather in it, like, get me directly across this dark expanse that I have to clear safely. And, that's the idea behind these.
Yeah.
And the detritus that will be left behind by people.
Gotcha. And One Good King follows up with a quick comment of invocation to the muses. Now there's a bunch of comments we missed along the way. Pumpkin Audrey wants to know if you have a favorite creature that you like to paint. I missed that one as we were going down there, but do you have something that you really love to go back to?
No, but I do end up doing white-tailed deer a lot, and I think it's because I grew up in New Jersey.
Yeah. What a lot of people don't know that are not from New Jersey is many of us actually keep a scoreboard on the dashboard for how many we've hit in the time that we've been driving, because you will get one.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
There are. I'm going to switch to one of those in a second because I've got a few of those in the lineup. Jamie Foster, artist, says, beautifully spoken. This is scripture to me. As climate change and the sixth greatest extinction looms over us every day. Yeah, that's a really that's a great point, because I feel like all of these things speak to that. And it's a good time. The 63 says, don't judge.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was. I don't know if it was Margaret Atwood or someone else, but someone who does like speculative fiction / sci-fi writer had said any book in the future that does not deal with climate change is science fiction. Kind of like it's so intersectional to literally everything that's going to happen.
Right.
And so you can't separate it. Like that is going to be everyone's reality.
Right.
And already is, whether people are recognizing it or not.
That's the thing. And I think that it has to enter into everything that we're doing. Just a quick note on the pin giveaway contest. For those of you that tried entering earlier, I know Boo Jazz tried to enter, and I know Ben Hagenbush tried to enter. Re-enter, because for some reason it didn't take. I tried typing it in. I don't want to interrupt the show for that, but I feel like I'm selling you short if you don't try to re-enter that raffle. So get in there before it runs out. Sorry about that. Jamie Foster Arter says, how do you keep yourself sane and upbeat while creating such dark imagery?
I mean, I think that's the thing. I think it gets channeled into there, and then I'm like, all right, now move on.
Well,
I think that's partly it. I think I process it through this.
Yeah, well, I think there's a sense of humor in some of them, even though there's some serious subject material, like when we saw the one panther devouring all those flamingos and leaving them, and that look on his face. I mean, I can kind of picture you chuckling as you're creating it, even though it's like a very serious topic, because that's the way you've portrayed it. So, and even in this one with the nurturing or the,
nursing.
The nursing.
Yeah.
So some of it has.
That one is a reference to Roman charity, which was a theme in like older art, based on a story of someone who was imprisoned in Rome, and then his daughter came to visit him in prison and would nurse him through the bars to keep him alive.
Huh.
And this piece is titled Hurricane Andrew.
Yes.
And I moved to Miami the day Hurricane Andrew hit. That was when I started college. And the day after, there was like 1 million trees down on campus, and it was like, a complete wreck. I mean, famously so. And I remember finding a dead owl, and it was just such a weird thing. Everything was weird and so surreal. And, there's all the human drama happening, but I kept thinking like, oh, there's other dramas happening too. And so this sort of, you have a doe and you have a full grown buck. Yeah. And they're sort of like in basically the detritus of who knows what flooded area, and he's nursing off of her, which would indicate that she probably had a fawn, which is now no longer.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to look at it, that little knee of his, it's actually his wrist that's popping up, is at an angle that's not quite right. So sort of indicates like maybe he's got a broken leg or whatever. And it's also sort of that references to like they reference the same thing at the end of Grapes of Wrath when Rose of Sharon nurses the old man and blah, 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 the whole thing. Like that's the same idea to it, like this moment of desperation at the end and sort of the old on the, that circular thing. But that was like a very impactful event. And this piece has like a ton of little, like tiny little references and stuff going on in it.
There's a lot of beautiful little details in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, let me see. We've got a couple more of the newer works that I want to jump back to really quickly. So let's see. I had a question in there. There were a couple of things that were coming up in the chat that I wanted to sort of make sure we got to. But so let's see. If you were to talk about, like, there's some interesting connections between a piece like this one, right? And I can sort of, I think, see the beginnings of this in terms of things like the symmetry, the birds and their connection to the space when I go to something like this, which is an older ink piece. So, this
one's actually also oil on canvas.
Oh, it is?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So that makes the connection a little bit more understandable.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I like this kind of this mirror image thing that's beginning to happen. This kind of, because we're already thinking about ourselves when we look at a piece. There's this kind of reflectivity that takes place in the confrontation, in the gaze. But then all of a sudden now it's sort of like doing it to itself on some level. I mean, I might be way off on that, but I feel like there's something worth mentioning there. But now it seems like rather than just having the simplistic reflectivity, they're built into this larger narrative. So what are you hearing when you sort of start talking to people about these? Like, how are people receiving the shift in your work? I'm curious.
I haven't had any shows of this really yet, so who knows?
Well, we gotta make one of those happen.
Yeah.
You trying to blow it up?
Yeah, I'm trying to look.
I don't have a detail of it actually.
Okay.
So, well, we got to get these out there in the world. Can we take a look just back a little bit now? I'm going to jump back in time a little bit so people can see some earlier stuff that you've done. And I'm scrolling way down here. By the way, I have someone new handling our slideshows. And so what used to be about 50 images has turned into 140. So
that's a lot.
I've got so much.
He's very thorough.
I've got so much of George's work in here. But, the landscape that sort of appears to emerge in these and the way the sort of landscape is rendered, when we start going back to some of the works like this, like when are these from? I don't have a date on stuff like
that.
This.
One is from probably like 2005 or something.
Yeah, so we're pretty far back on these. And,
yeah.
And is this still during the inking period, or is this?
Oh yeah, that's all ink on paper.
Yeah, but it kind of, you're sort of revisiting that sort of earthly.
I am. And actually, if you had, a detail of this would show a lot of all the whole rocks are all basically graffitied up, but with it all does tell stories. Like it's all about. There's kind of clues in there about where this takes place and what may have happened. They're like a bit post-apocalyptic in a way, but there is still like viable settlement, and there's so much stuff in there that was like kind of my imagined history kind of being recorded on these rocks of whatever culture was still there and how they then recorded what came and went.
Gotcha. And what's cool about that is that elemental earthliness and the story that exists in it is now sort of being done in a new way in the work that you're doing, but in a different kind of physical emergence, it feels like, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm happy you brought that up, just because like I've been thinking about it a little bit with like some of this, like, this idea of relic and stuff you're building, but I didn't think about it in relationship to these pieces, and you're totally spot on.
Well, good, because I was kind of making a leap here. And, I think it helps to have all these images in one place because I'm able to be like, go way back in the time machine and be like, whoa, wait a minute, look at this.
Yeah, no, like I haven't looked at these in a while.
So, yeah, it's kind of cool the way, I don't know. I mean, I love holding on to everything I've ever made because sometimes, digging back 15, 20 years, all of a sudden tells you something about yourself that you've forgotten.
Yeah, it's funny. And in this one, I know actually this one and the other one also have a similar image, which is a simplified image of another painting I made at the same time. And so like I know that there's all these little like self-referential things that was like linking together all these different pieces too.
Right. Yeah, which also is currently happening in the newer ones as well. Right? Huh. Nice. Okay. And I'm going to keep pulling some of these up here. I'm curious, do you have anything on the horizon? What's coming up for you? Like in terms of, do you have anything in the works right now?
No shows on the books yet.
Okay.
Just sort of plugging away.
That's not that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that,
yeah, I mean, one only has so much control over that sort of thing.
Agreed. Okay, so I think I see you pulling up. You're digging in.
Some of the older stuff. Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Let's see. We've got this one, which is another one like that. I'm also curious. So there's this way in which we go backwards. So I'm digging into this sort of back look at this one. Like this one, if I take that and then immediately just make the shift here. I love these connections between work that's that far back. Even that linearity, that diagonal orthographic linearity in that piece. Anyway, for what it's worth, I'm just, I'm having fun now. I'm just like, let's see. Ben Hagenbush, George, how long does it take for you to create one of your large scale paintings? Yeah, I think that's a great question.
It totally depends. It's also really, really hard to tell because I often will work on multiple things at the same time. And then because I have so many other things like happening in life, it's hard to sort of like sometimes you end up having a full week that you can work on something. Then like a week and a half goes by that you can't touch it because of life and, everything else. Really large scale stuff that was like the ink on paper, like something that would be like 11 feet by 6 feet, like a giant one. If I didn't have other stuff to do, it would take about a month. But that was if I literally didn't have anything else to do.
Right. So that's a month straight.
If I could just work on it.
Right.
Wow.
And some of the stuff I'm doing now, it depends. Like smaller pieces, I can get a small one done in a week. It just depends now. It just totally depends on the scale for the most part. But nothing less than like for a really big one, it's going to be a month for sure.
Gotcha. And Pumpkin Audrey's favorite question that we also love to ask because we got to know, what do you listen to in the studio?
Oh, it's funny. I used to be pretty much just music. And then I, like everybody else, I got addicted to like trashy idiot podcasts and like, and I listen to like a lot of garbage. I do listen to a bunch of different, like, and I'm even susceptible to some of the like horrible murder ones, but then I'm like, why am I listening to this like horrible murder stories? Like it's fucking awful. And then I'll burn out on those and be like, I cannot touch that anymore. And also so many of these podcasts, basically like you're listening into these and it's like, oh my God, like everyone's like, oh my God. And I feel like they can be all reduced down to like someone with absolutely no discernment or skills at sniffing out an idiot or sniffing out like a snake oil salesman gets duped. Like that's ultimately the story. Like so many of them I'm listening to, like, like Dirty John or any of those are like really popular. And they're like, and she just didn't know. You're like, this whole thing is a red flag. The guy's a fucking liar. Like, how can you not see this? Like,
it's like obvious.
So I feel like a lot of times when I'm listening to those, it's just like Chronicles of Idiots.
Right. I have to tell you, if you want a good one to listen to, a friend of mine named Alex Goldman does a podcast called Reply All. And he calls it a show.
Oh, I've listened to that before.
Oh, he's brilliant. Yeah. And there's an episode in there where he talks about how we all know when you get that spam call where somebody says that, your computer's been compromised and you need to let me get control of your computer, that you would never do that. Everybody knows not to do that. He decided as a podcast episode to do it. And he not only finds out who this guy is, who is in, I think he's in India. He befriends him over 2 episodes, flies there and hangs out with him. It's bizarre. Okay, last comment in the chat. Glenn Lavertu says, a great group to listen to, that I mentioned already, is a black metal band named Botanist. Glenn saw that we were talking about Botanist in
It
Gin.
actually ties it all together.
He's tying it all together, whose themes are right in line with these paintings. Check them out. So there you got your next music reference to listen to, George.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Listen, we loved having you on the show. This was absolutely fantastic. The 45 minutes always goes by
It flies.
like
It
that.
really, really
At least
does.
for us, it does. I don't know
Yeah.
how the audience feels. But
well, thank you. I'm happy that you asked me to come on.
yeah, and keep us posted on what when something happens for you. We would love to come and see your show. We'll definitely plug it here and get all of our people to come out and see what you're doing, man.
Yep.
Great.
So, and let's see. Jamie Foster Artist says, "You rule, George." And this is the part where the chat starts flying up, where everybody's thanking you. But we really appreciate having you on. We love your work, and we hope to talk to you very soon.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, George. You have a good night. We'll talk to you soon, buddy.
All right. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks. All right. Let's pop over here to the main window.
Yeah. So
and
do we have his website that we can throw up there? Because you guys should definitely check him out.
Yeah, you know what? And I'm sorry I didn't put that up there, but it's actually very simple. So his Instagram is at George Boorujy. So all you have to do is plug that into an internet search. And then his website is georgeboorujy.com. So if you want to see more by him, or at least just keep tabs on him, those are the 2 places to go.
And we will have a blog post this week, so you can always check out largeglass.org, check out the blog on him, and we'll have all that information posted there as well.
That's right. Now, I don't know why Streamlabs has been screwing up tonight's giveaway, but I know that Boo Jazz and Ben Hagenbush were trying to get into tonight's raffle, and it just for some reason isn't taking. I noticed a weird lag in it earlier, and I've been trying to correct it. I can't seem to do it. We will fix that and have the pin giveaway next week, so I don't have to tinker with all of the controls.
Yes.
So my apologies about that for all of you. But we should have our closing music.
We should. And we should also have our credits.
Our credit. You know what? If you hadn't reminded me about the credits.
You told me to remind you.
I know.
The only thing is he gave me a list of things to remind him of at the beginning, and then to remind him of this at the end. And I'm like, I'm not going to remember that, but I did.
And I didn't, because I got to tell you, I can't tell you how many times I've created some cool new little thing to throw on the screen, and I get it all prepared. Then I get excited about the show, and I totally forget about it.
Oops, but not tonight.
Not tonight. Yeah, I wanted to just kind of put something up there that thanked not only our moderators who are out there, which, by the way, we kind of need more of. So if you're interested in moderating on our channel, reach out to me and let me know. I will give you power in the chat room, meaning you can boot people.
And we'll give you a pin.
Yes, you'll get a pin as a moderator. Yeah. Of course, you have to pass a small test, and I'm just joking. We also want to thank our supporters, which we really appreciate having all of you. So let's see. Great show. Thank you from Pumpkin Audrey. No problem, guys, from Ben. Thanks, TNT, from Joseph Barbaccia. Mom says, such an amazing show. Thanks, Mom. Let's see. Carolyn Thou wants to come along, too. I forget where we said we were going, but you're welcome to come anytime. Ben Hagenbush says, George, you are amazing. David Backus, thanks for showing up, and we appreciate you hanging out. Boo Jazz, no worries. We'll be back next week. Awesome. Thanks, Jess and John Park. Thanks to all of you for hanging out and watching us. We love having all of you.
Yes.
We're going to toast our audience.
Yes, episode 81, and to our audience.
And we know that George is still hanging out in the green room, so we want to go over there and say goodbye to him.
We do.
So, from us to all of you, thanks again for watching. Got some great artists coming up. Next week, we've got sound artist John Roach coming on the show. And the week after that, we've got Jessica Brilli, which is just going to be fantastic. So we'll catch you next week, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right.